Good morning, everyone. It's great to see all of you here. Wow, I just actually got off a plane from Portland. I was coming in from the PNBA Booksellers Association conference this morning. So I got here a little bit late and I walked in the room and it was completely packed. So nice job showing up, everyone. Before we get started, I wanted to just see from a raise of hands, and I apologize, like I said, I got here late. So if we already did this exercise, you can just roll your eyes and go with me. But how many people here are publishers? All right. And how many people here are on the manufacturing side? That's pretty even split. That's amazing. That's really cool. All right. So as I said, I just flew in from Portland this morning and I was attending the PNBA Regional Booksellers Association show. And so I've been representing all aspects of the supply chain over the past 36 hours. And, in the last panel, you heard about how communication is key. And that's really funny because yesterday when I was meeting with publishers and booksellers and talking about the fact that I was attending this conference, it struck me how surprised and bewildered many of them were to learn that publishers and manufacturers actually get together and talk about the business of making books. And they wanted to know exactly what we were going to be discussing together. They were like paper types and stuff, And it really struck me that as much as many of our publishing colleagues are experts on content, positioning, and market value of the books they sell, surprisingly few, aside from those of you who are probably production folks, know about the business of how books are actually manufactured and the effects downstream. And yet the state of manufacturing has a direct and critical impact on publishers' abilities to effectively price, inventory, and sell books. And for booksellers, it's the same, which is why I'm so excited to be here with this panel of manufacturing experts. So when I call your name, please wave. John Galligan of Bradford and Bigelow. Andrew Van Sprang of Maple Press, and Kent Larson of Bridgeport National Bindery. All right, so as we heard from our last group of panelists, publishers are increasingly experiencing changing retail demands, cash flow challenges, and margin pressures from across businesses in all parts of the supply chain, right down through their trading partners. And this makes it really challenging, more than it has been really ever in the history of publishing, to run and scale a profitable business. So in this panel, we're going to flip the conversation that we just had and ask these manufacturing experts about the current challenges and opportunities that they see, and what they're doing to future-proof their businesses, but more importantly, the reason we're all here, which is to communicate with one another. How can these insights be communicated back to publishers, and what can publishers communicate about their businesses so that they can effectively plan and allocate resources? And my hope, publishers, is that I always like to give homework when I do these types of things. I'm going to give you some homework. Please do not hoard the information that you're going to receive today. What I'd like you all to do is think about going back to your respective companies and share what you've learned with your colleagues, from editors and designers to your marketing and sales teams. Because as we learned from the last panel, this is really about communication. And when we're talking about those designers who want to create those beautiful embellished books, we know how that affects the market downstream. So please make sure that when you're learning something here, you're taking it back to your respective companies and sharing that information. So as always, I find panel discussions are more interesting when they become dialogues with the audience. So our panelists are going to introduce themselves, and we're going to kick things off with some high-level observations, but then we'd like to open the floor for you to share your questions and comments and really have a conversation. That's what we're all here for. So with that, I'd like to start by handing it over to John Galligan. Let's start with you first from Bradford and Bigelow. Welcome, John. Can you share a little bit about not only your experience, but also what Bradford and Bigelow specializes in?
I'd be happy to do so. I think, as Marco pointed out, we're primarily an educational book printer. We do college textbooks. And as Marco said, there are 3 trim sizes of books we do. The first trim size is 8.5 by 11. The second trim size is 8.5 by 11, and the third trim size is 8.5 by 11. But we get great manufacturing efficiency, better lead times, more reliable schedules by having that focused approach. And I'm a great fan of Henry Ford, who said you can have any color you want as long as it's black. Bradford, Bigelow, we say have any trim size you want as long as it's 8.5 by 11.
All right. Next, Kent Larson from Bridgeport National Bindery.
Good morning. I'm the exact opposite of John. I live in the world of one book at a time and multiple different trim sizes across a couple of different platforms and multiple bind styles. So our business is kind of different. We are not in Bridgeport and we are not just a bindery. So our name is screwed up. Any marketers in the room, please come talk to me afterwards. So we are a bindery that used to do library books and library periodicals for places like Harvard and Yale and in the libraries where people used to go and read in the book in the stacks. That transitioned big time several decades ago, and now we print one book at a time and ship generally direct to consumer, but also have some publishing accounts where we do send things into the distribution channel. And we are located about 75 miles west of here in a town called Agawam, Massachusetts.
Thanks, Kent. And Andrew from Maple Press.
Hi, everybody. Maple Press is located in York, Pennsylvania, and has been in business since 1901. We actually are kind of a little bit of a combination. We'll do that 8.5 by 11, but we'll do everything else as well. And we'll do it down to a single copy, or we'll do a short run digital printing, or we'll do tens of thousands on web offset equipment. We've been servicing a bunch of different marketplaces. University Press is one of our biggest ones, and some of the specialty trades. Generally speaking, we're doing hardcovers and paperbacks, mostly black and white, but we do some color on the digital side as well. And recently we've been putting an awful lot of money into investments, into new equipment, and we're hoping that that's going to be able to help, well, half of you.
Thank you. So one of the things that I really like about this panel is that you all bring diverse business models to the table. And so I think it's going to be an interesting conversation to talk about what's happening for each of you right now as you're looking at the demand and what's coming in. So I want to start with you, John. Can you talk a little bit about the state of your business right now and what you see as some of the trends that you're reacting to?
The first thing I'd like to say is the advancements in inkjet technology have been tremendous. And I give a lot of credit to Hewlett-Packard, Mueller Martini, Steve Fife there at Magnum, and Canon and others. But it's a sea change for the industry because the inkjet technology enables you to reduce inventory levels, reduce back orders, and improve cash flow, as well as just quicker delivery. So right now, our business is quite busy on the inkjet side. Companies and publishers are ordering lower quantities as they come up to the year end. So the technology there has been great. The advancements in terms of quality and productivity is tremendous. And my only complaint with Vahaj and Andy Featherman is you keep inching up the prices every year on the ink and on the equipment. So that's going to hurt your business long term. But other than that, the technology has been great, and it's been great for the printers and the publishers.
Thanks, John. And Andrew, in your comments, you mentioned that a similar observation, and we heard that from the publishers as well, and that's been trending for a long time, which is that print runs are really trending downward. And so I wanted you to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, it was mentioned in the first conversation this morning, we're seeing a reduction overall in terms of print runs, and it's really kind of taking a toll in terms of first printings are down, and then reprints are going direct to a digital format and or POD. And in a lot of the cases, we're actually seeing a lot of digital first scenarios. In some cases, we're still doing it with ARCs. But yeah, we're definitely seeing the marketplace shifting, at least in the customer base that we have, and seeing a lot more print runs coming down in quantity. And we're seeing the total number of titles come down slightly. That seems to be sort of on a kickback now and starting to come back up, but the quantities are remaining lower than they've been. And there's also a bigger push toward more paperback work. The costs involved in the hardcovers, we're seeing more paperback firsts instead of having a hardcover or doing a paperback first with a hardcover that's going digital or POD.
Ken, did you want to say something over there?
Yeah, our model is a book of one. So in many ways, our issues are software related and being able to connect to the outside world. And so it's file management, imposition, and making sure that structure works really well. We've got to make sure that we're making money every book we produce. So minimizing waste internally is huge. Adopting lean principles of manufacturing and just doing everything we can to encourage no spoilage is what we're about. If you were to come to our shop, you would notice that we're 75 people strong, and there is still hands involved with making even a book of one. If we're doing hardcover, we're focused on hardcovers, but we do paperbacks, coil, Wiro, down to a book of one. And that is where it's a lot of juggling of water balloons, where we are really trying to manage some of the ins and outs of the paper stocks, 12 different stocks that we offer. This is where John and I will have different experiences. So it's a lot of management, and that all requires software up front. But the benefit I see is that in the emerging market, the TikTok economy that's happening right now, it gets the book of one direct to consumer from the source of content creation.
I wanted to thank you for that. I wanted to ask a little bit about one of the comments that we heard in the panel before, which is the tension between standardization. And we know, John, that you only offer those 3 trim sizes over there, so you're pretty standardized. But there is tension in the market between the downstream demand, the retail demand for differentiation, and pressure put on publishers to make those titles really unique. And it sounds like you're able to satisfy some of those needs, but I was curious if any of you have thoughts on that and how you're handling that, because we all want to push towards standardization. Are you seeing more requests for things that are unique in the market, and how are you handling it?
Yeah, I loved what Tim said earlier about nobody cares about quality. Yeah. Where are you, Tim? Yeah, there you go. Quality does still matter, and people still want books, especially if you're making them yourselves. If you're going through some API to have books created, the paper stock matters, the materials matter, embellishments matter. So the tension that we have is collaborating both upstream and downstream, upstream with software providers, and downstream with people who are the ones inventing the equipment. We have a combination of really, really old library binding equipment on our floor, as well as brand new kit that's coming to market that's in many ways sometimes experimental and innovation. And the hard part for us, honestly, the tension comes with breaking the ice and agreeing to do something that's a book of one. And I'll give you an example. Right now, everybody wants the shiny embellishment on the cover. And right now, how do you price a book of one with a shiny embellished cover? It's impossible. So we are limited where John is not. John can do those things. And same with Andrew. We're not. We're just not doing that. We could put in something that would cost a lot of money, but the return on that investment's not there.
Andrew, you mentioned that you're seeing a similar demand, and I know that you're talking about, you're really focused on ROI right now. So how are you handling those requests? And, the other piece of this is that it's not like you can just press a button and magically have the technology to do these things. So how are you managing that demand?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times it involves the collaboration between our print sales team and the publishing group. Budgets obviously are tight, and depending on what kinds of paper are being used, what kind of trim sizes being asked for, there's a lot of different questions that can go on there that can help, as Tim alluded to, talk about, what are the ways that we can find a way to maybe save some money over here because we might want to do an embellishment on the cover. And we're definitely seeing the cover embellishment concept coming around a lot more than it has in the past. Typically, spot UV was kind of like the thing. And now it's a little bit of everything. We're foil stamping, we're spot UV, there's gritty spots and this and that, the other thing. And now the latest trend is the printed edges on books. That's coming around. And a lot of it comes down to what can be affordable on any given project. How do you make it affordable? One of the things that we've done is really try to streamline our process in terms of the paper stocks that we offer, but also being able to do that in a manner that streamlines them for offset, but allows that same paper to be used offset, inkjet, digital, all the way down to the single copy on a toner-based machine. So that way, if the book has a life that can go either up or down, because we sometimes start off with a POD printing to get that book into the marketplace while we're putting through a couple of 1,000 copy offset run. So we have a little bit of both ways, but this way that product can look pretty much identical all the way through. And that's a conversation that we have with our customers and try to figure out how we can get them there.
Thank you for that. John, so I know that your business model is such that, you're very standardized. Do you feel any of that pressure related to customers asking for new types of product? And how do you think about that?
We decline those new products. I mean, if you need a 6x9 printer, we just don't do 6x9 or 5.5, 8.5, and we hire a new salesperson. Sometimes it takes that salesperson 2 years to figure this out. We have a competitive advantage on 8.5 to 11, and I always say, why would we want to compete in a market we have a disadvantage? It just doesn't make sense. So my recommendation to all the publishers here is what you want to find in selecting your vendor base is best in breed. Who's the best in breed at 6x9? Who's the best in breed in 5.5, 8.5? Kent is the best in breed in one-off books, and Andrew does all the 5.5, 8.5. Give it to 5.5, 8.5, 6x9. Give it to Andrew. His equipment set up for that. And you make money in this business by manufacturing efficiency, and we get the volume. And of course, it's not just all our presses. We have 10 presses set up for one trim size. So we have great redundancy and backup and reliability and schedules, but it's also the bindery equipment. When we'd have a perfect bound book might be 20 pockets. But if you've got to change those 20 pockets from 8.5 to 11 to 7x9 or 6x9, that takes time. And if one of those pockets needs to be adjusted, that could take an extra half an hour. So we get great productivity in our equipment because we're running 24 hours a day, 6-7 days a week. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, we get great productivity in our night shift because they don't have these changeovers that diversified printers have. So my recommendation to all the publishers, look for category killers in your specific markets. And of course, the other recommendation I have. The other recommendation is if you're a book publisher, select a book printer. And there are two advantages of that. A book printer, we don't do any magazines, catalogs, journals, packaging equipment, et cetera, et cetera. Those are all different markets. They all have very few of them reprint. And the great thing about a book printer, 50% of our work reprints, 50% of our titles are reprints, 50% are new titles. But we have great manufacturing and scheduling efficiency here, because if we have reprints, if you've got a back order, you've got something, a pleasant surprise, an adoption, you need something quickly, we can take care of it because we can push some of those back orders back. Some of the inventory items back, some of the reprints back. And we have 10 presses again that are focused on one trim size. So you want a partner, a long-term partner, whether it's a 6x9 printer or an 8.5 to 11 printer, who continues to invest in the business. And as I said to Marco earlier, we were chatting, this is a CapEx business. If you don't invest in CapEx, you fall behind. And the other big advantage of CapEx, it reduces your labor costs. The new equipment is so much more productive than the older equipment. And so you want to maintain state-of-the-art equipment, keep investing in the CapEx, train your employees on it. We're very big on training in-house, and it's paid dividends for us. And so I think that's the answer.
I would add to John's as well, that if you're a publisher, ask detailed questions. Be a nerd. Ask about the things about bulk of paper, PPI, anything related to a book manufacturer's world, site visits, get a chance to really understand what it is that makes the physical book. John speaks so perfectly about, hey, 2 o'clock in the morning, I've got to be producing just the same as I'm doing 2 in the afternoon. The only way you do that is if you've talked all the way through the product so that he's getting peak efficiency and you're getting what you want. And that's the name of the game going forward for all of us, is to try to get as much efficiency in every step of the way so that you don't have to think about it. Not that we're lazy, but it's so much better to set it and forget it and just let it set up and just run. And to be able to do that, whether you're doing thousands or mid-range quantities or even a book of one. That's the goal. And it's not always achieved, but it's at least something we can get closer to if we ask detailed questions and become nerds.
Thank you for that. And John, I just want to go back to one thing that you said related to diversifying your printing sources. I'm curious, do you recommend each other? Do you regularly recommend other printers? Because one thing that I find when I meet with my publishers is that they don't always know all the options that are available to them. So in thinking about communication and how we can help each other to work together, I'm just curious what your process typically is for recommending each other.
We're happy to recommend our friendly competitors. I recommend Kent and Andrew highly for the products that we don't do and they do. I can't recommend Andrew for 8.511 products, but for everything else, he's a good source of he's a good supplier. And this industry is really about long-term partnerships. Mm-hmm. That's what our clients like, and they like that all our CapEx is devoted to one product line. We don't do magazines, we don't do catalogs, we don't do packaging. And what you want as a publisher, in my opinion, is a long-term supplier who's going to grow with you and is committed to making the supply chain for your product line the best it can be.
I would say we definitely want to recommend everybody. And
yep.
And I think, honestly, this is a pitch for the BMI. The BMI is that organization that brings printers together, also suppliers, equipment companies together, and also paper companies. And all of us don't know everything. And the more we collaborate, I don't know about you guys, but my life is way too short. I love my job, but I would much rather help John and help Andrew and just be a real guy trying to get the publishing world going forward. And I think that's what the younger generation wants to see in business leaders, that we're all just real people trying to make a product better. And honestly, with books, they still matter. They're always going to matter. So how do we get them into the hands with the right people the right way is really what this is about. So a big, huge pitch for what BMI is doing. It's awesome.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that all of the random things that come through our website funnel to me. So I see every individual self-publisher who might think that they want to produce a book, and they have all different shapes and sizes. And a lot of the time, they're things that I can't handle. If it is something that I know somebody else can handle, absolutely. Sometimes if it's a close relationship I have, I'll call that other printer and ask them, do they want to just pick it up? Do they want me to just forward the information? Or in other cases, I know I have a standing yes to that question, and I'll just go ahead and provide the information of the contact and send it over. Ultimately, the more books that get produced, the more people that read books, the better every single one of us is going to end up being, because another book is out there. That means another book is going to follow. And that's good for all of us. So I'm always out there promoting it.
Thank you for that. So I want to talk a little bit about looking forward into 2025. This year is essentially done for most of us. And I want to talk about how you're thinking about the year ahead, where you're going to be investing, what the trends are that you see coming. And Andrea, I want to start with you on that.
Sure. From the outlook that we're hearing from the publishing clientele that we have, 2025 is looking a lot like 2024, at least in the markets that we serve. Based upon that, we've seen a little bit of a decline this year. So that's actually putting us in a position where we're looking to diversify our customer base and go into some markets that we haven't been in a number of years. So we're looking at doing that. And with the investments that we've recently made that include one-color inkjet as well as four-color inkjet for covers and jackets and short-run books and inserts. And we've got some new toner devices, and we also just put in a brand new binding line, hardcover binding line. So we're looking to find ways to keep all of that equipment running. We ask for all your help. Feel free to come and see me afterwards. But ultimately, we're seeing that the marketplace has changed somewhat, and we're going to need to do some things differently. I definitely think, continuing on the line of standardization from the supply chain side, if you wanted to do a different size than is typically made, in the paper mills, you're going to be in a long line. They're just not as readily available. The amount of different sheets that are out there is declining. Same thing with the cover materials. There's fewer and fewer companies out there that supply them. And the colors change on a somewhat regular basis and things disappear. But we're seeing, I think, multiple companies telling us about, again, conservative print runs for next year. I think with the industry having open capacity, much of us, many of us can, adapt very quickly. So if we get a rush reprint with the different technologies that we have, including the digital and the inkjet, as well as web and sheet fed, we can kind of get things done pretty quickly one way or another to make sure we're keeping books in the marketplace. And the last piece that I'll kind of just drop that little Easter egg out for the materials crew that's going to be talking later. Sustainability is definitely going to be a conversation that we're starting to have almost daily right now, especially with the EUDR. So we'll be, certainly diving further into that, and it's going to be disruptive. It's good. There's costs involved. There's a lot of different tracking that needs to happen, and it's going to be an interesting time in the marketplace as we get closer to December.
Thank you for that, Andrew. I wanted to talk a little bit about sustainability. It's something that I think we've all been tiptoeing around as an industry for a long time. And unlike Europe and other places where there's top-down regulation that's being put into place, we haven't been motivated in that way. So I'm curious whether, Kent and John, that's something that you all are also thinking about in terms of your businesses and how you're investing in sustainability or thinking about it.
I think for Bradford and Bigelow, we're a leader in sustainability. We're a pioneer in the use of LED UV inks. With the first one worldwide that installed a man-rolling press that uses the LED inks, which eliminate VOC emissions, much lower heating requirements, and lower paper waste, et cetera. So we see that. I think most printers are pretty good on the environmental side. 98% of the paper that goes through our plant is either recycled or sold as a finished product. So we feel good there. We continue to do that. And I think one of the big trends that I see next year is an ongoing trend. We talked about it this morning a little bit. Is B&B has migrated to being a supply chain partner. And what we do is we print, we warehouse, and we deliver. Over the last few years, we've added 180,000 square feet of warehousing space. And people like this model. Why have a printer like Bradford and Bigelow print a job and then ship it to the Midwest and have half those books shipped back to the East Coast or to whatever another part of the country? We save time and we save money. So we simplify the supply chain. And our standard line to our publishing clients, publishing is a different business than book printing. We say to our publishing clients, you guys should focus on content development and marketing your product. We'll take care of all the logistics, printing, warehousing, and distribution. Our sales team can't help you write a fifth grade math book or market a fifth grade math book, but we can take care of all the logistics and simplify your supply chain. And 50% of our clients now use some aspect of our warehousing and distribution. Some clients use 100%. We print 90% of their work, 95% of their work, and we do all the distribution. Other clients use our distribution on a seasonal basis, and some use our distribution on a project basis. We finished a project last week for a client, Midwest publisher, had a Midwest warehouse, but they wanted us to do 77 drop shipments, which we did because they wanted to get the books out in the market as soon as possible.
Yeah, I would second that our print on demand one at a time model is very sustainable. It goes pretty much directly to the consumer. The key to that is that we are also one of many that a lot of our customers use multiple different print facilities, not just us. We only have one facility here in Massachusetts, so they're using global printers to get the book is close to the source of shipment. So their algorithms in their software send their orders to as close as possible to the shipping address. We'll occasionally get a call to do something that would ship, over to California. But for the most part, we've got customers that keep things as close to the source as possible. So that carbon footprint, I know in the US, there's not as much as an emphasis as Europe, but that's becoming way more important. And so the idea of a distribute and print model is really smart.
Thank you for that. I wanted to ask a little bit about investments in software and technology related specifically to forecasting. You know, we've heard that sometimes publishers can be challenged related to a switch in paper type, not knowing that there's going to be a shortage there, or, you know, not having space on a press. I was curious whether there are any innovations in the software space that you all are thinking about and planning investing in.
Well, I don't know that I would say that there's any particular model that we're looking at from that standpoint, but we always have the conversations with our customers about when you know about a project, let us know about a project. I think more of that planning is coming from the publishing side and their inventory controls, which are changing almost daily in terms of what their needs are, what their warehouses are asking for. So it's a complex program. It's a complex problem. But I think, you know, the collaboration that we need to have with our publishing partners is the most important piece of that puzzle. Just talk to us. As I mentioned, the capacity in the marketplace is kind of opening up right now. It's giving the publishers an opportunity to kind of be a little bit more flexible with what they might need. You know, and I know that within our company, we have a handful of accounts that have a handful of individual titles that sort of reprint with frequency enough that we know when to ask the question, because it's been 2 months and we haven't printed that title. And so we're going to say, hey, do you think you need another printing of XYZ title? And amazing how that conversation can spark them looking at their inventory and say, well, we didn't necessarily think so, but maybe we should. So that's a piece of what our sales team is doing regularly.
From a perspective of forecasting, we're elastic. We don't know what we're going to get each and every day, so we've got to be careful. We're producing on average, the last quarter, on average, a little bit over 11,000 books a day, with an average run of a little over 2 books per. So you do the math and realize it's a lot of titles. You publishers out there, I give you props because you have been gatekeepers, and you're the ones that have decided what should be published and what shouldn't. When that goes away, and the internet is available, anything can get published. Anything can come in. We are where digits meet physical media. And so our software, and what we want to do in the future with software is use AI tools to filter out the Nazi hate speech, to filter out any indecent material of sexual content. So we've got to be very careful because we employ people who have to see stuff that gets printed. And so we literally have eyes on our product. And not that we're interested in censorship, but we are the ones that, on behalf of our customers, will reject and cancel orders that might actually be in copyright as well. We've seen true publishers' work be copyrighted through online sources, and we will reject that because we still have human beings looking at product. If we can use tools in AI to stop those files from coming in at the first place, that serves everybody better. So that's where we want to be.
Thanks. Did you want to add to that?
The key is communication forecast. We're okay. If you have a busy forecast, busy quarter coming up, that's great. But if you have a slow quarter coming up, that's great. Let us know, because we have to let our paper merchants know, hey, what the volume looks like in the next month, 2 or 3 months, or 2 or 3 months out. So the key, it's not that complicated, but it's really communication is the key issue, key metric there between this to create a good supply chain.
So before we move on and talk a little bit more about communication, because we're moving into that space and we've already had some good recommendations for how publishers can more effectively communicate with their manufacturing partners, I just want to spend a few minutes talking about the global markets and what that means for manufacturing in the coming year. On the publishing side, publishers have been very focused on growing their businesses out across global markets. On the manufacturing side, I know it's been volatile over the past couple of years where you saw a big spike during COVID in demand for domestic printing, followed by a decline. So I was curious how you're thinking about your competition overseas and what you're seeing in terms of publishers' demand going into global markets.
Well, a lot of the publishing companies that we work with certainly are selling overseas as well. And in a lot of cases, they already have partnerships similar to what they have with us with a vendor that either has another partnership with an overseas printing source and or the printing source directly. In light of the EUDR and some of the other sustainability aspects of it, there is some pieces of that make sense to produce the books as close to proximity as you possibly can. Obviously, the carbon footprint becomes reduced in doing so. But ultimately, I mean, a book is something that we want to be able to share across the world. Mm-hmm. So having the ability to get it into any of the markets that it can be used makes the most sense. For Maple Press, right now, we're serving the marketplace here in the United States. We have a couple of customers that are in Europe, but for the most part, what they're doing with us is the books that they're selling in the United States. They have a partner that they're doing their UK books with. It's just kind of the marketplace that we're in at the moment. I don't know that it's going to change greatly unless there are other issues in terms of supply, et cetera, that would cause more, for instance, more paper to be available here and less available there. That could spike the amount of business that people want to produce here in the US. So that could be good for us.
Did you want to say something? I was going to call in Kent, but I'll let you go. I
was just going to say it for us, we do some printing and shipping overseas. But for the most part, our model is simply if there's a recommendation to print and distribute locally, overseas can do that. We're happy just being where we are.
Thanks, John.
Overseas has had minimal impact on our business because we sell lead times. Our lead times are very quick, 3 to 4 weeks tops. We'll do things in 5 days or less if you're on a back order. So for our vertical market, it's not been a major factor.
All right. Thank you for that. So we're going to talk a little bit, we're going to go back to communication and how publishers can provide information to help you to more effectively serve them. We talked a little bit about, when you see inventory getting low, you're going out to the publisher and asking for them if did they feel like they're going to need another run. But Ken, you mentioned AI, and there was it January, I think, when some of us were all together talking about AI at one of the BMI conferences and how we can effectively utilize AI to communicate back and forth between publishers and manufacturers. So I was curious, Kent, whether you had any thoughts related to how AI can potentially help publishers to more effectively communicate with you.
I am not an AI expert. I enjoyed Minority Report as a film years ago. But for us, the tools that AI represents, they're amazing. What it can lead in terms of efficiency. For instance, I don't ship much overseas, but I know that I had to ship something and I had to use a US document export or something or other. And I just simply went to Gemini and said, okay, can you just tell me what this is? And I was getting answers like that. So there are tools that it can use to get answers quickly that are fantastic. In our perspective, AI could probably help individuals tweak their products better. We're not the company that really cares what gets published. I know a lot of you probably are way more important. That's more important to you. So if someone wants to actually ChatGPT a book and say, I want a 100-page book, 6x9, it'll come through us. So I don't really know what we would do other than having things that are built that are tools that can recognize images or certain words. That's what we're looking at it for.
Are there other sources of data that the three of you wish that publishers were providing more effectively to help with forecasting?
I was going to say for us, if we can get any data regarding color, regarding what kind of four color we're dealing with, so that we know what's going on in the inkjet upstream, that helps. That'll help us really understand cost better and productivity better.
One of the things we've tried to do with our manufacturing platform is to create burst capacity. And by that means, a lot of times publishers, they have a forecast, but then they have the pleasant surprise. Some are pleasant, some are unpleasant. But the pleasant ones, they get an order they didn't expect to get for 10,000 books or 20,000 books, or they had a stock out that they didn't anticipate. And so we'll try to design our platform to provide that burst capacity to take care of that those situations that come up. But the forecasting, as I see it, is really between the publisher and either the schools or the retail customers that they're using. It's not so much between the printer. With our larger accounts, we have weekly meetings on forecasting and weekly forecast, and sometimes they change and sometimes they don't. But it's really comes down to communication.
Andrew, what about you? Are there other forms of communication you wish you had with your publishing partners that they're not providing right now?
I don't know. I would say that they're not providing. I think we're getting the information. I think sometimes we have to ask for that information rather than it being volunteered, which isn't necessarily a problem. Again, another excuse for a phone call, a Zoom, or an in-person meeting. We're okay with that. But that forecasting, what it does for us is it's not only forecasting in terms of when we're going to have 2,000 copies in our schedule, but it's the materials for 2,000 copies and when we're going to need to have that. What are we going to need to do with our machinery to make sure that have that time available? There's a lot more to the puzzle than just, I need 2,000 copies in May. For us, there's a lot more behind the scenes as to what that's going to do to us when we have that in magnitude across all the different publishers that we work with. And it's also important when things are changing. We talked about the fact that, print runs for first prints seem to be coming down. Again, that was one of those things we saw it in the orders coming in, but it's not like we had a lot of conversations about, by the way, next list, the initial print quantities are going to be lower than they've been. There weren't a lot of those conversations at the time. We saw it, we felt it. We also felt, when the inventories were very high during the initial COVID timeframes or at 2022, we saw the reprints disappear. There wasn't a conversation about the reprints disappearing. There was just no reprints coming through. So any of that kind of communication that we can get ahead of time would be very helpful, as well as any major changes, something different in a list. You might have done 6x9 for years and, hey, somebody came up with the idea that half the list should be 5.5, 8.5 because we think it's going to reduce the cost a little bit. Well, there's different materials that we need to order for board sizes, for paper sizes that we would want to know about if something major like that was going to change.
Here's a thought with regards to AI where a publisher could take advantage of it is right now, if you're thinking of doing shorter and shorter runs and how you order needs to be completely fully automated, a book of one, how do you do that? You're probably using another party's software to do that. You might be using Amazon, you might be using Ingram. Well, the trade-off for that is you're giving them a huge percentage of your profit. If you could bring that in-house and be your own brand, and be your own website and not have to use Amazon or Ingram and go directly to the consumer, upstream software is gonna save that. And there's where your profitability comes.
Thank you for that. I'm going to open the floor up for questions in just 1 minute. But before we do that, again, we've talked a lot about margins getting thinner and thinner for everybody in the room. It's not just for publishers. It's not just for manufacturers. It's for all of us. Are there any recommendations that you have for publishers in terms of streamlining their business from a, batching shipments perspective, or other suggestions you have for them that can help both parties to create efficiencies and economies of scale in their businesses?
Yeah, I'm from our perspective, everything we're doing is trying to batch together like sizes and shapes of books. So if you have multiple 5.5, 8.5s coming through, and you can find a way and their schedules do work together, it is a benefit to put them together. Obviously, if it's 8.5 by 11, just go to John. He'll take care of it. He'll batch them. But I definitely think, there's some pieces there that can be done that will help in the long run, not only from a perspective of cost, but also the efficiencies and then the speed with which those projects can get done in the manufacturing environment.
Any other recommendations, Kent or John?
I liked what Karen mentioned earlier about, hey, give us information about how many books need to go in a box. Anything that we can get, any detail upstream really, really helps us downstream in terms of manufacturing. And even though we do a lot of one at a time, there is aggregation at the very back end with regards to where and how we ship. So having that information is very important.
think what I said earlier, the key trend that we see is this print, warehouse, and distribute model. We eliminate all this unnecessary shipping expense and time. So and the publishers mentioned it today. It was mentioned 4 or 5 times about distribution. So I see that trend continuing. The other trend that I see with the major publishers is they want fewer vendors who can do more work.
Mm-hmm.
And we've tried to position our company. We've invested heavily in 4-color web printing, 2-man roll-ins. We've invested heavily in digital 4-color equipment and the warehousing and distribution. So we just simplify the supply chain, as we like to say, it gets repetitive. There are 2 different markets here. Publishing is content development and marketing, and book printing is print, warehouse, and distribute. And then, so you guys can focus on what you're good at, and we can focus on what we're good at.
Thank you. Get the last word, John. All right. We're going to open up the floor for questions, comments, other topics that you all would like to discuss.
I don't know. We have this full of room with this least amount of questions here. I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to say too much.
Hi, I'm Jane Searle from WW Norton, and I'd like to ask John a question. It was great to hear when you said when we get a pleasant surprise and, oh, here's a 10,000 copy order we didn't expect, you can jump on it. That just made me wonder, how do you manage your own tech stock inventory on the floor so that you're ready to do that with any given stock for any given customer at basically a moment's notice?
Well, the way we manage it, for instance, we don't do any coated paper. We don't do any magazines. We don't do any catalogs. So we have no coated paper. We have a limited number of stocks that we have in inventory. We have basically the offsets and the matte stocks, but that's it. So we get to know our customers, and we know kind of what your expectations are. On Norton, we know the kind of paper, Jane, that you run. So we have that hopefully in stock. I think my purchasing department has that, or inventory, but it's about long-term partnerships and getting to know the clients. And that's, we have the equipment. As long as we have the paper, we're in pretty good shape.
There's been a lot of improvements in the Book of One equipment. Do you see more options for binding coming ahead?
Yeah, in the world of Book of One, it's clearly paperback. Perfect binding has been the leader. But yeah, there's developments in hardcover binding. There's been some great developments with equipment from a number of the manufacturers that has allowed us to get down to a Book of One with regards to thicker or thinner books. Same thing with even coil. But a lot of what has to happen in that Book of One world is hands-on. You have to load the pocket. John talks about a 10 pocket or 20 pocket. We're loading a pocket one at a time. So there's sorting. There's management of if we've got a roll of paper, we've got maybe 100 jobs on that roll of paper. Maybe we have 1,000 jobs on that roll of paper. So it comes off, we've got to handle it. So it's a physical handling. And so in binding size, there's all kinds of equipment there that you can buy, even down to just simply tabletop to get something done. The question is, how do we then go to market and charge for something? You mentioned earlier, a coil bound book that you had up here. That's not worth it. Well, we do that one book at a time every day. And that's something where it costs a lot of money. But there are people in this world that will pay to have one book produced with a coil bound because they want a cookbook or something like that.
Back here.
So for John, Kent, and Andy, you mentioned we're becoming more of a capital-intensive industry. Is there a general rule of thumb, and there might not be, of how much money you should spend as a % of your annual revenue on new CapEx? Is there such a rule?
No.
That's a great question. I'm just interested in having cap.
Yeah, I think it depends on what's going on in the industry, what the advancements are, the age of equipment that you're looking at, and what kind of replacement value you can get, and what's the ROI.
Marco, just one further comment. If the CapEx, for the printers here, it comes in lumps. So, we buy a new man roll and press, it's $10 million. and we might buy some new bindery equipment. It's $5 million. And the next year we might buy zero. So when you buy the equipment, you've got to say, hey, we need the press equipment. We need the bindery equipment. You want to get it installed, you get it running, and then you consider further CapEx 2 or 3 years down the road.
Hi, my question is logistics. Are you experiencing any challenges with logistics in the U.S. Of lost product?
Did you say of lost product?
Yes, I've experienced where skids have been missing because they shipped somewhere else and some challenges with logistics. And when I asked the manufacturing facility, how often does this happen? And they kind of cringe because it seems like it's happening more often. Different carriers.
I'll let these gentlemen speak to the skids, but with regards to individual shipments going UPS, FedEx, US Postal Service, Mail Innovations, or whatever, we have generally had a pretty good track record with those books getting directly to the consumer when they need to get there. Our issue is making sure that they get the tracking number and that the tracking number is getting supplied accurately.
And, you know, we also run 3 distribution centers, so we do a fair amount of logistics as well. Books is definitely the biggest piece, but we also handle other products. I have not been seeing that as a major issue coming back to us in terms of lost product. I mean, there's certainly times when, you know, a FedEx Freight or something will pick up multiple pallets and then they'll go to a transfer station and one of those pallets doesn't seem to make it to the end place at the same time, but we're able to look into that immediately and get it rerouted. I'm not hearing that that's causing major issues with our publishing clients.
I would agree, Andrew. You know, our shipping, we ship out 10 to 15,000 packages per month. And usually we track that, how many packages are not returned or sent to the wrong address, whatever. And it's usually 5 or 10. It's like less than 1%. And it's usually incorrect address was given, something that FedEx got confused, whatever. But it's, as Andrew said, we've seen minimal problems there, negligible.
Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you, Andrea, Andrew, Kent, and John.
Thank you, everybody.